Chap 0. Twist it. If you want to kill me. The sword embedded in the man's heart was twitching. At the end of his short life, the man haughtily asked for his death. The woman who held the sword twisted it without saying a word. His chest was cut open and blood gushed out, but he didn't even let out a single groan. You're still so beautiful, and yet I can't have you. The man's hand slowly reached up to touch the woman. The blood on his fingers dirted her cheek. The woman held no expression. Cold and firm, just how she was when he fell for her. It was a beautiful sight worthy of the end of his life. The man wore a hazy smile. Before long, his last words poured out like blood. Damn bitch. Damn bitch, he said. Phew. It's not lagging anymore. I sighed while looking at the screen. I once again looked over this character's settings. Deculein von Grahan-Yucklein. Disposition, evil. Initial job, senior professor. Initial MP, 3357. Aptitude, rank 6. Aptitude type, magic, control type / elemental, earth, fire. Traits, 6. Personality, 13. Deculein. One of the game's mid-bosses, a named villain. There had been a lot of bugs since there were a lot of important villains with a wide variety of branching storylines, but fortunately, he had done a lot of sneaky and cunning things throughout the whole game so that he'd die without fail within the first 11 hours of gameplay. This time his cause of death was his fiancée's sword. Woojin SSI? I was going to play the game again, but I heard a familiar voice call out my name. I turned to look back. Yeah. RSSI. Even without any makeup, her eyes looked big and her long hair was shiny even without special care. This woman, who was endowed with such beauty, was URA. She's the one I'm dating, or rather dated. Is the testing going well? I shrugged at the question. Yes, I'm still on it. URA nodded silently. As I looked at her, I noticed a new accessory hanging around her neck. My lips pulled up into a pout unconsciously. Looks like it's going well with your boyfriend, huh? Huh? Oh. I'm not sure. URA shrugged her shoulders as well. Some of our gestures had become somewhat similar as we dated. I think it's going well. I pointlessly drummed my finger on my mouse. I had heard about it from the rumors, but I still felt very upset hearing this directly from her. Why do you ask? Just because. Our breakup was already 6 months ago. In the end, there was no one right or wrong. We just couldn't understand each other anymore. I was at my roots a loafer while she was a natural-born workaholic. Her drive to improve led me to become a man who could make ends meet, but in the end she couldn't accept my introverted nature. No, it was because I didn't want to change. I wish you all the best in your marriage. Huh. Ego. Was that a bit pathetic? My eyebrows twitched provocatively along with my sarcastic remark. However, it didn't get to URA. Just get ready for work. There's been changes in the settings, so you have to get the modeling done. Again? No. Why does the author keep changing it? I sighed and looked at the clock. 9 p.m. It was already night time, but I still had a lot of work to do. Were you watching one of Deculein's scenes? URA, who was looking at my monitor, smirked. Yes. He died after 11 hours. But if you use certain tricks, you can kill him right at the start of the game. Isn't he supposed to be a mid-boss? That's one of our game's charms. The more you leave Deculein to his devices, the more evil he'll become, so the earlier you kill him off, the easier the game will be. The difficulty depends on the player's choices. I see. The game was tested hundreds of times by all employees of this company, including me. I had already played it 4 times. It must have been played 1,000 times in total, but the mid-boss called Deculein always got killed except for one time. But did you know? The model for this character was actually you, Woojin SSI. For Deculein? Yep. So I just kill him off right at the start. What? I frowned. There was still the line "damn bitch" displayed on the monitor. Foo-foo. Didn't you notice while modeling him? You look similar. That can't be. I only met the author twice, you know? I guess he saw you while dropping by the company. Anyway, look. You even have similar personalities. Similar personalities? Me and that guy, whose last words were "damn bitch." You're similar. Phew. So that's why I got dumped by you. As Yuare's expression hardened, I raised my hands pretending to be scared. Ego, I'm sorry. Did that sound kind of pathetic, too? I couldn't help it. After hearing me call myself pathetic again, she lost her temper, so I couldn't help but poke at her more. Eventually Ura also got involved. Asterisk. I'm the one who's pathetic here. It's just that you think you're pathetic. Do you have paranoia? It's me who's pathetic. Asterisk, shut up. Just check the game. How do you feel about this time's test run? I decided to change the subject. I put my eyes back on the monitor. Asterisk, the game itself is fun. The backdrop of this game was a fantasy world mixed with culture from the 14-20th century. The whole framework was that of a massive RPG, but its main focus was its storytelling. Asterisk, the only problem is that, if this flops, the whole company will go bankrupt. REW appeared in Korea, the barren land of console games, like a bolt out of the blue. As soon as it had been founded, it produced one successful game after the other. Now, REW, which the whole world was paying attention to, was creating a AAA-class game that was already beating the profits and investments of the past before it had even been released. If it failed, we'd be screwed. Literally screwed. Don't worry. It won't fail. Didn't you see the reactions to the gameplay sneak peek? There was a huge uproar. The story of the game and its difficulty depends on how the player acts. Although it's a single-player game, you don't play alone, but with several named characters equipped with advanced AL. Thanks to that fresh approach and the hype that REW had built up, not only international players but also many international webzines had nominated our game as GOTY, Game of the Year. Asterisk, as long as we keep raising our IP reputation with a single console, we can rake in a lot of money online. We'll make it, no matter what. As it had been said before, there were a lot of attractive characters and jobs in this game. Knight, wizard, demon, demon hunter, administrator, adventurer, mercenary, king, aristocrat, etc. The player could become anything. Okay. That would be great for me. I'd get a bonus after all. With a big smile I turned my head towards the window. Oh, there he is. My seat was by the window, so I could see the street outside the company. Near the entrance, a shiny car was waiting for URA. By the way, isn't he more pathetic than I am? I whispered and pointed out the window. I said these words casually. She smiled slightly. Asterisk, he's a good person in a different sense from you. I was also a good person, huh? That was enough for me. Even if she didn't mean it like that, I'd just take it that way. Oh, yeah? That's a relief then. Of course, I was still upset, but not as much as I was before. As she said, the man in that car was a good person. I'd be angry if he were some type of gangster. Yeah. By the way. You know, that. URA seemed like she wanted to say something, but her mouth kept on snapping shut. She was going to mumble and struggle like that for a bit and then turn around saying it's nothing. I knew her habits just too well. So I already knew what she wanted to say, as well. RASSI. We first met 3 years ago, right? So what are you trying to say? Office romances were to be kept a secret. We started dating before we joined the company, but as it evolved into an office romance we had to keep it a secret. Asterisk. Well. What was I going to say again? URA smiled helplessly. Tick, tick, tick. The short silence that floated between us and the sound of the clock was so loud that it bothered me. The first person to break the silence in this awkward moment was Ura. Well, Woojin SSI. I'll get going now. Okay. Get some rest. Yes. Good luck with work. Clack clack. She moved further away accompanied by the sound of her high heels. She was more perfect than anyone I've ever met, but she was actually more beautiful on the inside than she was on the outside. That was how wonderful she was. She was my greatest treasure. She was also the first person who convinced me that people could change. Goodbye. I spoke words that couldn't reach her anymore. I just mumbled them to myself. I felt pathetic, so I just sighed and put my attention back on the monitor. No, but the author's pretty mean as well. When I looked at this character called Deculein, who had already died, I got goosebumps. This is supposed to be me? That's ridiculous. Although there was a certain resemblance. Certainly, my appearance was used as his base. I did think that he looked like someone I knew while I was modeling him. I didn't know that someone was me. I need to upgrade his appearance. Externally, the gold haul had ended, but the company's and author's greed remained. So they gave me the highest authority and asked me to do the final touches on the models. Let's see. Nobody would complain if a character was made a bit more handsome. No matter how villainous he was, I was the model, so I should at least give him a decent face. I've never been called ugly after all. Fixed. While I was checking over my correction, I suddenly saw the character's characteristics in my field of view. There were two characteristics in this game that determined the character's personality. Traits that directly affected the base specifications and personality that indirectly affected them. The more important a character is, the more likely it is for them to have one of these traits and personalities. Traits: intimidating grace, prodigy, mediocre magical talent, broken, aesthetic sense, fate of a villain. Deculein's qualities are these 6 above. Oh my god, this combination prodigy and mediocre magical talent. It's the worst of the worst, the most evil. Personality: elitist, misophobe, habitual, competitive, noble etiquette, sensitive, authoritative, pretentious, resilient mind, OCD, atheist. There are a lot more personality traits. Such terrible characteristics. No matter how much he was based on me, I was neither an elitist nor was I a misophobe nor was I pretentious. I didn't even have any authority, so how could I be authoritative? I glared at the monitor with dissatisfaction, glancing at the tapered codes next to the traits and personality columns. HMHM. There was no one in the office. I looked over the other traits and personality codes. I wasn't going to do anything bad, I was just scrolling through them for fun. Found one. Understanding. With that you won't be so pathetic at least. Looks like it's similar to sympathy. But for some reason it's classified as a trait and not as a personality. I put understanding among Deculein's traits. After that, billionaire. One has to have a lot of money. Click, click, click. In addition to that, I added a lot of other characteristics as a joke. Man of great wealth. Midas touch, vision. Iron Man, and so on. Just what am I doing? I put in this and that, about 5 traits that wouldn't be that obvious, only then was I satisfied. I let go of the mouse and leaned back on my chair. Laughter unexpectedly flowed out of my mouth. It's been 7 years. 7 years. For you and me, 7 years was such a long time. It was too long to just end in an instant. No, maybe it was just me who thought of it as an instant. You just gradually grew tired of this. You must have slowly prepared for this breakup as well. I was just not aware of your change. Dryling a loud notification. I almost fell off my chair. 5 out of 107. Lane, Wu Jean, are you still working? It was from an in-house messenger. The sender was Lane SSI, author of this game and general manager of the AL department. As the name suggests, he's a foreigner. Oh, yeah. If you want me to change the models, please let me know. I'll change them right away. I moved my mouse to remove the traits I just added. Lane, no. That's not it. I'm just waiting and watching. I suddenly stopped. What are you watching? Are you watching me? I looked around, but no one was there. What are you watching? Me? I blinked and stared at the monitor. Soon, I got a reply with a smiling emoticon attached. Lane, puhaha carrot dash carrot no look out the window. I turned my head towards the window without much thought. Asterisk huh? Transparent glass and the sky stretching beyond it. It gave birth to light. A flash fell while illuminating the heavens and earth. Light craved itself into the air like human veins. Lightning. With my eyes wide open, fierce rays of light flooded in. A huge shock shook the world. The bunch of rays that flooded the office blinded my vision and the delayed thunder rattled my ears. Ruyuamble. Didn't remember anything after that. Chap 1, Deculein. It's quiet, so it's comfortable, but doesn't this make you feel anxious? Recently, the atmosphere around the Deculein mansion had quieted down. Silence was rather unusual in this magnificent mansion that's considered the best in this world. Hey, don't say that. Don't worry about it. Just stay still, stay still. The unusual calmness was awkward for the maids and servants of the mansion, but after a week, they were able to adjust to it. Oh, do you perhaps think that it's because things are going well with Miss Fryden? At the young maid's question, the other maid shook her head. Ei. Do you really think so? I think it's the opposite. Asterisk really? I'm confused because I've only been here in this house for a week and they don't even check the cleaning. Enjoy it. Since we don't know how long it'll last. The servants were chatting about the strange changes in the mansion's owner. Has this ever happened before? Well, it's been 10 years since Lord Deculein has been in office. Their owner was so famous and sensitive, so there were many anecdotes that came to their minds that the flow of the conversation completely changed. It was at that moment. Creak. The front door was opened wide and the sound of shoes echoed through the hall. Clack, clack. A cool and sinister echo. The maids rushed to line up quickly in front of the unexpected visitor. Asterisk, where is that man? The VIP who posed this sharp question was a beauty with short-cut, black hair. Yes, right now, the master is. Uriel, their master's sister, was equally well known for being as sensitive as him. Her presence made the maids bow. Guide me. The servants guided her without daring to make eye contact. Together, they climbed the central stairs of the mansion and ended up standing in front of the gates of the highest floor, which was completely used as a single room. Knock, knock. Uriel lightly knocked on the door that everyone in this house feared. Knock, knock. There was no response. Knock, knock. Knock, knock. Uriel tried it a few more times but couldn't take it anymore and burst open the door. Asterisk, hey. In the neat room a handsome man with a disheveled face lay there. His hair shone subtly like a dark crystal and his fine, white skin and straight, intelligent features were darkened today. This was enough to shake any woman's heart, but Uriel just fired away without caring about anything else. What the hell are you doing? Uriel's insolent way of speaking shook the servants. However, the owner of this grand mansion only murmured in a low voice. Thought I'd wake up if I just went back to sleep a bunch of times. Guess I'm still dreaming. At the end of his words, the maids gave him a strange look. Just how badly did things with Miss Fryden go? And Uriel frowned as if she understood his words in a similar way. Right now, everyone but Deculein had the name, Julie von Deculein, floating in their minds. The second daughter of the Northern Fryden family. The current fiancée of Deculein von Deculein. Externally, the two were promised to each other, but their feelings towards each other were insanely different. Deculein seemed to love Julie with all his heart, but her feelings for him bordered on disgust. This wasn't just simple speculation, this fact was actually pretty well known. Can't you stop thinking about her? What are you doing, even canceling all your lectures? Lectures? Yes. Uriel took some documents out of a luxurious clutch bag. Then she threw the bunch of papers on the bed. You said you'd do it yourself. And if you just stay here like an idiot, you'll bring shame to our family. Are you fine with this? There's an event at the university, so make sure to attend. At least if you don't want to lose your professorship you're so proud of. You're very bold. Deculein smirked. At that moment, Uriel became angry. Blood vessels were throbbing at her white temple. I'm not being bold, you're just being stupid. Idiot. Very harsh swear words. The maids trembled, but the master didn't react even a little. DME. If it was his usual self, he would have punished me. How could he have become so lethargic? I wish he'd return back to normal. Alright, go out. HMPF. Uriel snorted and went out the door. She didn't want to see that idiot who turned out like this just because he was dumped by some woman either. Uriel Nim. Would you like to have a meal? I'm going. But you've come such a long way. Hold on. I'm going. Many of the servants followed her in a hurry. The master seemed to be in a bad mood today, so it was best to stay out of his sight. Lectures, huh? I looked at the documents given to me by Deculein's sister, Uriel. The title of the lecture was, Imperial Senior Professor Deculein, A Fundamental Understanding of Magic and Attitude Toward Mana. Furthermore, the table of contents was as follows. Magical distinction between attributes and types. A rough outline of circles of each magic branch, such as destruction, support, summoning and spirit. Proper usage of mana. What kind of magic system is so diverse? Where did science go in a world where magic is so diverse? I remember it was said that science when developed sufficiently wasn't much different from magic though. I lay on my bed thinking nonsense. A week had passed. Before I knew it, a whole week had passed in the blink of an eye. I couldn't find out why I'm stuck here even after all that time. I thought it was a regular dream, but it wasn't. Then I thought it was a lucid dream, but it wasn't. After that I thought it was a VR game, but it wasn't. The most convincing reason was that I got struck by lightning, that what I'm experiencing is the afterlife. Anyway, I've become that fricking game's character I was modeled after, Deculein von Grahenjucklein. For reference, Deculein was a link that connected the whole game, an arch-rival to many named characters or otherwise known as the mid-boss to players, a named villain. The enemy of his parents, the enemy of his lover, the enemy of his hometown, the enemy of his peers and so on. In addition to this, I'm sure that there were many more people who bore a grudge against him, a villain only woven to die and experience hardship. Of course, Lane said that there was a little twist to this character, but did he mean the fact that I'd possess this guy? He's going to die on almost every route. This villain would die almost inevitably, like a villain should. Whether the player killed him themselves, he got killed by a named character who bore a grudge, randomly got into a fight and died, got assassinated or died some other way. Like that purple-haired guy from that famous hero movie. I have no idea who that is. Rather than that, this is. I sorted the papers that Uriel threw. I took them in one hand and glanced at them. The lecture was scheduled today. Have to go. It was my first time giving a lecture, but I couldn't just sit idle. I couldn't be lazy anymore. I had to somehow gather information, I had to find some things out regardless of whether I could go back or not. Top survival goal, be a necessary part of the game. Side quest, university lecture. Store currency plus 0.5. These strange sentences flickered in my field of vision. I was resuming my activities part because of Uriel and part because of this. Not only was Uriel among my death flags, but that store currency was quite important as well. Fortunately, the knowledge, attitude and experience to give the lecture didn't pose a problem. Understanding. Rating. Unique. Explanation. The ability to comprehend things. It's activated by consuming mana. Before being trapped in this world, I added understanding, mistaking it for something similar to sympathy. I believed in this skill's performance. No, that's not it, it's just because it was a unique ranked skill. It was the unique rank that only appeared in the latter half of the game, and the character I was playing before didn't even get it. Let's wash up. I got out of bed and went into the bathroom. I took off my clothes and turned on the shower. A clean environment, hot water and a shower with good water pressure. These were all things I liked. After taking a shower, I opened the door to the dressing room. This room that was bigger than my apartment was filled with all kinds of valuables and suits. I chose clothes by trusting my instinct. A white shirt and an aristocratic navy suit. A blue tie and intelligent-looking glasses. Then I put a coat over it, sprayed my whole body with perfume and put up my hair neatly, not leaving a single strand unattended. After that, I looked in the mirror. Honestly, this style looked nauseating, but it seemed rather elegant. That overflowing ego felt quite arrogant, but a graceful dignity certainly seemed to mingle with it. It's probably the work of intimidating grace, aesthetic sense, and noble etiquette. In fact, I can't say or do anything against etiquette. No matter how hungry, one shouldn't just eat one's food at will, one shouldn't blabber, and one has to act elegant and cultured at all times. As such, it also became natural for me to do that. As if my personality completely changed, it felt as comfortable to use these inefficient manners as breathing. Even just witnessing crude and unsophisticated behavior, I'd feel scorn and contempt rising up. Asterisk. Won't let myself get swallowed by this guy. This character had a lot of characteristics, especially under the personality category. What was written in the system log at the moment were noble etiquette, elitist, misophobe, authoritative, OCD, and so on. Those personality traits were most certainly transmitted to me. That's why even this obligation to hold that lecture felt so natural to me. I'm an outstanding and noble aristocrat. What bullshit. Woo Jin. I looked back at the handsome man in the mirror. Kim Woo Jin. I won't lose myself. I won't get swallowed up by this stupid character. That's your name. Woo from House and Jin from True, Tien, spelling out name, Jip-Yu and Chamjin. A healthy South Korean man, tall and handsome, objectively speaking, but using someone else's words, a loser. A pathetic and lazy jerk. That's me. Slap. I slapped my face and then went out of the door. Talk, talk. The clear and regular sound of footsteps. Long, smoothly moving legs. Indeed, an elegant and orderly gait. I stood in front of a car parked in the yard admiring its vintage style. Good day, master. A vehicle with an antique design that could have been found in the modern Ford era. This was a symbol of wealth in this world. I'm going out. Understood. As I climbed onto the back seat of the car after the attendant opened the door for me, I saw some small fellow sitting on the seat next to mine. Under the pulled-up robe hood I could see a cute but rigid face. Asterisk Pro, Professor. Good day. Here you go. He spoke in a very tense voice and handed something to me. It was a bunch of documents. Asterisk. Are you a magician? Pardon? Ah, yes. Yes, sir. I've been working under the professor for 3 years now, though. I was merely joking. I laughed elegantly and looked over the documents. I thought it was about the lecture, but it was actually a script. It was a script containing every subject from the start to finish of the lecture. Actually, how did Deculein prepare himself for lectures? In fact, he only appeared talented on the outside. The trait I had right now wasn't genius or prodigious but mediocre magic talent, so I really wanted this script. Good job. Asterisk, pardon? However, when I mentioned that he did a good job, the magician became embarrassed. To be honest, this compliment also made my stomach twist into knots. It was an obvious personality contagion, but I had to overcome this. I closed my eyes and added a few more words. You did a great job. Rest until we get there. Yes. Yes. Understood, sir. The magician with his head down went as silent as a corpse. The mouth that was exposed from under his hood seemed to have pulled into a small smile though, seemingly pleased with the compliment. I read the script in my hands. But the paper got on my nerves. I thought it was dirty. Next time, I'll put on my glove. No, not that. Now let us proceed. I knew the settings of the game to some extent, but thanks to a more solid understanding, I could quickly grasp the script itself. About 30 minutes have passed since I started preparing for the lecture. An interesting scenery appeared outside the car window. I naturally looked over to it. Following that, even I unknowingly smiled. The outside was filled with the shimmering waves of light emitted by the sun at noon. A road surrounded by vibrant flowers and trees led to the entrance where the statue of the first emperor stood tall. There were many buildings filling the vast land and soft beams of light gently fell upon them from the sky. As a whole it was called the Imperial University. This body's, Deculein's workplace. Everything that got reflected in my eyes, which was now more real than 3D, was the result of my design. Chapter 2, Deculein, 2. His height alone was rather overbearing, at around 190 centimeters. He wore formal attire, appearing close to perfection. An eye-catching appearance that had a strong impact on others. The perfect golden ratio was shown by his appearance and clothing. Deculein von Deculein. There were no flaws or gaps in him, to the point that he seemed to be noble dignity incarnate. His elegance flowed into his gait, his speech, his facial expressions, into everything he did. That jerk. But even these perfect looks seemed like nothing more than a detestable shell to some, or rather quite a few. Sigh. Ifrin Luna. As soon as Deculein appeared, she vented her anger. Not only were her words bloody, her actions were as well. She clenched her fists so tightly that she drew blood and bit her lower lip. He had stolen her legacy, her father's achievements, and had ruined him, which had led to his death in the end. The public praised Deculein as a genius in interpreting magic circles, but his reputation was solely reliant on her father's work. Attention. At that time, a magic crystal amplified Deculein's voice. I shall start the lecture now. The spacious auditorium was filled with hundreds of people. Deculein finally scanned the sea of people below his stage. His gaze was as sharp as a knife. She wanted to immediately pull out a knife and stab both of those eyes. That trash. However, it was not the right time yet. Deculein was the enemy she wanted to kill. That was the only reason she applied for the university tower, but revenge without a proper backdrop would just make her feel regret. She lived just for this sweet moment, so there was no problem waiting for it a bit longer. Nice to meet you. But maybe she'll just cause a bit of trouble for him. Suddenly having gotten an idea, Ifrin smiled innocently while pulling down the hood of her robe. Saw hundreds of people in this vast auditorium. Their eyes glistened burdensomely and a vintage-styled camera flashed dizzyingly. I faced all of this alone. Well, it was weird. I didn't feel even a bit of tension. I just took all these things for granted. In my life, this kind of treatment was just natural, this attention wasn't pressuring but a privilege. This noble sense of being one of the chosen ones stuck to my body like skin. Asterisk. Nice to meet you. I'm Deculein of the Deculein family. So I just leisurely started my lecture. The beginning of this lecture was the first line of the script and the introduction of this character named Deculein. I'm a senior professor at the Imperial University Tower and a magician of the monarch rank who governs over the elements. No matter if it's the water, wind, fire, or earth attribute, there is no difference. It was a sentence filled with an intoxicating feeling. As is known, magic is largely divided into 3 attributes and 9 types. Attributes include elements, origins, and vessels. Types include summons, spirits, destruction, support, control, malleability, harmony, illusion, and specialized. I was just saying what was written on the script. Even though that's all I did, I focused my breath and attention. It was part of the trait intimidating grace. Therefore, a magician can only earn achievements in magic if they work on their attributes and the right type. When I finished speaking, I flicked my finger. Tack. With a refreshing sound, the lights in the auditorium went out and magic circles filled the air. The perfection and release of mana. The realization of that is what we call magic. Therefore, one has to first gain an understanding of the magic circle for the realization of magic to succeed. Now, let's take a look at the magic circles above. I paused for a moment, so the visitors could properly look at the magic circle. At first glance, it seemed like a geometric figure consisting of multiple lines and curves, similar to fractals. This 68-stroke magic circle uses a circuit that looks like a curved indentation, and the mana is first concentrated in the center and is then pushed outwards. What spreads from inside to outside is the nature of destruction and support, but the destruction magic has to be a straight line in the form of an indentation. Therefore, this is a sub-magic formula. Next. The first item on the table of contents was Foundation of Magic. The lecture went on for about 15 minutes and I didn't lose my composure even for a moment. The script flowed so naturally out of my mouth as if it was stuck in there. Curiously enough, I completely understood the composition of this script I saw for the first time today. Asterisk, this is how magic is based on magic circles. However, does mana always lead to magic, and if one wants to use magic, is it really necessary to study magic circles? From this point on it was about how to use mana. Now, the auditorium was holding general students, knights or aspiring students who weren't magicians, so it was a topic out of their scope. No. It depends on which part of the body you put your mana into. At the end of my words, the magic circle disappeared and a picture of the human anatomy took its place. Its heart, head, and abdomen each held a mass of blue mana. First, the head. In other words, the brain. It's easy to imagine a technique in your brain, so, of course, more complex lines and circles can be implemented. Therefore, magicians usually keep their mana in their head. Maybe this guy also had his mana in his head. In numerical terms, 3,375. It's not that much. I remember seeing some named characters having an initial mana amount of 30,000. Next, the heart. The heart is the place where blood gets pumped out, so mana that gets stored in the heart spreads more easily. However, it's difficult to keep it in one place. Therefore, the heart is a better place for knights than magicians to keep mana in. I spoke slowly and easily so that everybody could comprehend the content of the script. I probably grasped how to give a lecture well through understanding. Finally, the abdomen. In other words, the lower abdomen. In this area the outside and inside are most often mixed, so its use is universal whether you are a knight, a magician, or a normal person. After talking like that, I suddenly checked my watch. 40 minutes had passed. What I want to say is simple. Effort is of course important. However, if you're not talented enough, you have to consider efficiency. Talent isn't given to everyone, so most of you need to choose and focus. I almost laughed while reading this line. If you're not talented enough, you have to consider efficiency. What you need is to choose and focus. That advice was incredibly fitting for the current Deculein. And I finally reached the end of the script. But that paragraph was a bit obtuse. I was wondering whether I should say it or not. Would the original Deculein have read that? I didn't know. I read it in there, so he must have written it. Lastly, is there anyone who has a question? There was only silence. That's good. If not, then dash. When I was about to turn around, relieved that no one had a question, someone raised their hand. Then she got up from her seat. Professor Deculein. A mysterious magic technique was found in the magician's dormitory last night. It's also believed to be the devil's work, so if Professor Deculein, who is said to be a genius in interpreting magic circles, could dash. Are you a member of the university tower? Well, isn't it basic courtesy to say one's name and affiliation first? I spoke right away. On the inside I was in a rush, but what I showed on the outside was pure elegance. I instinctively spoke in an aristocratic way. What? Oh, my name is Dash. Too late. I won't take questions from rude children. The lower part of the robe-wearing magician's face turned red. I'm sorry, but I can't help it. The mana consumption of understanding is pretty overwhelming. Mana, 2005/3375. It's as much as 1300 points at a time. It would take a lot more mana to interpret that new circle. I don't want to overdo it. I think I'm getting dizzy. This is the end of the lecture. Poofuvuvukuhu. In the midst of the ridicule and cynicism the magician received, I adjusted my disheveled sleeves. I removed the wrinkles from my suit. I put on my overcoat and buttoned it up. Finally, I finished reading the script and came down from the podium. This sequence of gestures were as natural to me as breathing. But still. When I turned around a loud sound rang in my ears. I stopped in my tracks and turned my head to look back. The unknown female magician, who was still standing, floated into the air and drew a magic circle with mana. Even the tower refused to interpret it, dismissing it as just some rumor. If Professor Deculein is such a genius, then I think you'll be able to recognize these lines immediately. I looked at that persistent magician. How dare you be so hard on Deculein? I wonder if there was a character like that in the game, but that magic circle definitely looked a little weird. A normal magic circle cannot be defined as just a straight or curved line with different arcs, but as dozens of living parasites that randomly intertwine. The moment I looked at the magic circle, regardless of my intentions, it got activated. As if my eyes were covered in paint, my vision turned blue, my speed of thinking and calculating had been amplified and time seemed to have slowed down. The smell of something burning lingered in my nose as the brain couldn't handle the load. It was only a moment. Mana, 360/3375. In less than 1 second, nearly all my mana got wasted. With that I was only able to barely grasp the magic's identity. Illusion type, barrier magic. Comprehending more than this, in other words, to know how to implement the technique would require double the mana, which I didn't have, but fortunately, she didn't want to know that either. She just wanted to know the identity of that magic circle. The rest of the freshmen in the dormitory are working hard to analyze this, but since it's vacation right now, there aren't enough seniors or professors to ask for help. Professor, if you could give us a hint that would dash. I won't have to give you a hint. It's barrier magic of the illusion type. It seems someone was trying to lock you up. Excuse me? That's it. A confident answer. The bold magician seemed embarrassed, but I just left the auditorium without looking. Chapter 3, Deculein, 3. Side quest completed, University lecture. Store currency plus 0.5. Bathroom. Bathroom, bathroom. Do you know where the bathroom is? I really need to go to the bathroom. This is proof that I wasn't Deculein. Even if part of Deculein's personality got transmitted to me, it's only a part and most of it was still me, Kim Woo-jin, so my stomach hurt as a result of that extreme mental stress I accumulated without noticing. Gruawool. Right now, I was the only one that knew I suffered from this very painful physiological phenomenon. Nevertheless, on the outside I seemed like the perfect model, walking. I walked. She stood still. So the gap between us naturally shrunk. When I was in her reach I stopped. Long time no see. She bowed her head to greet me first. She was a beautiful woman. White, fine hair and clear, icy eyes. They reminded me of that bloody scene I once saw on the monitor that one day. 8 out of 16 of Deculein's deaths I identified involved her. Asterisk, long time no see. Her name is Julie, this body's fiancée. And the named character who will rise to the top of the knights in the future. How have you been? Asked Julie. It was a question I had no answer to. I looked at Julie without any expression. If she were a servant she would have looked down without being able to take this look, but Julie just silently waited. In the end, I only answered with this. Fine. This was the best I could do, however Julie creased her unperturbed forehead. She took a deep breath and said, "Do you remember the promise you made me last week?" I stood still and looked into her eyes. Deep inside these beautiful eyes, flames of hostility were raging. You broke that promise. It was unknown what promise she was talking about. I nodded and tried to pass by. I really had to shit. Julie stepped one step to the side and blocked my way. Again, like this? That woman didn't let me run away. She was staring at me with a face as cold as an awl. In this situation, the only thing I could do was something rather terrible. Asterisk. We made some kind of promise? I really didn't know, but I still got goosebumps on the back of my neck. Julie's anger caused a reaction on my skin. It tickled. My back felt hot. I really wanted to scratch myself, but this noble body didn't allow such low-class behavior. Instead I continued saying slightly awkward things. I'm seriously asking. I had a fever for a few days so I forgot some things. Huh. The woman's face was filled with despair. It was more lament than anger. God damn it. You've lost it now. She used a cool and cold voice towards her fiancé. A mixture of sorrow and discouragement. Go ahead. She stepped out of the way and I brushed past her. Even with her so far away, the back of my head was still tickling. After leaving the hallway, I entered the guest bathroom. I looked around to see if someone was coming in and only after confirming that no one was around, I did what I had to do. I almost died from that itching. I scratched my back and my neck while relieving myself. What a tiring personality, to only be able to scratch myself while minding the place and occasion. That's why I won't be able to live a long life. Julie spent a long time standing there even after letting Deculein go. The anger and hurt that swelled inside her burnt red hot. She was trying to force it, but Deculein turned out to be a more difficult opponent than she thought. He was a board member of the university. Gosh. A young magician of the ether rank wearing a cone hat came along. She was the chairman of the board, counted as a promising archmage candidate, just below the eternal rank, at which one would become immortal. However, among Julie's personal connections her personality meshed the worst with her. As soon as she found Julie, she covered her mouth with both her hands. Oh my. If it isn't Professor Deculein's wife? They weren't married yet, she already knew that that guy didn't use these words to describe them. So Julie just nodded her head. That lecture was great as expected from a senior professor, he explains really well, that's what I thought while listening. It would be nice if I could acquire his teaching methods as well. I know. I was watching. She tried to cut her off like that, but the chairman grabbed on to every single detail. Oh, really? Were you supporting your husband? Are you finally getting along? She never had such a romantic purpose as supporting him as his wife. Today, Julie came to see with her own eyes if Deculein would keep his promise. Julie made it clear to him. If you, Deculein, keep your faith, that is, confess your continued deceit to everyone and ask for forgiveness, I will be with you even if the world collapses. This was not a matter of what shame a broken engagement would bring, or of maintaining a formal relationship to save the family's face. Advertisement. It's just the release of her beliefs she wants to keep as a knight transcending all worldliness. That's all there is to it. She was sure he'd agree. What's wrong? Today's lecture was great. Julie nodded, while grinding her teeth despite her natural virtue. Deculein broke his promise in the end. Achievements reached by stealing and extorting them from other people, not by his own ability. He didn't even repent on the wickedness and corruption behind it. He wasn't even brave enough to do that. Now she really had to give up. He would forever live pitifully among his manipulated subordinates and his own deceit. What a little lamb. You're not much fun today. Well, good luck. I'll get going. The chairman left with her lips pouting. Julie was still standing on the marble floor as if she'd taken root. Deep inside her were a slew of distorted emotions that seemed to devour her. His yuck line. Her own frighten. Someday, something which someone told her repeated in her ear. Deculein, who stands out as a magician, and Julie, who has the qualities of a gifted knight. If the blood of our two noble families are in harmony, it would be beneficial both in pedigree and politically. However, at some point, both noble families came to know that Deculein's magical talent was nothing but average. Deculein lied to the world and became a professor, calling himself genius of magic circle interpretation. After some incident, the source of his theories got cut off. If the two families weren't connected to the central politics or if they were less distant, either side would have gone wild. They were easy on each other because both were prestigious. If neither of them stepped forward and rejected the other side, the engagement would not be broken, and even if it were broken, Deculein's sins would not get revealed. So Julie thought she would have Deculein right his wrongs himself. Nevertheless, he broke and rejected his evils by acting more firmly than ever today. If so, now, she'll have to bring it about herself. The end of this contemptible engagement. No matter what, the end of this relationship shall come. Are you okay? The lieutenant, standing behind her back like a shadow, spoke in a low voice. His name was Baron, a man with jet black hair that covered his face. Julie shook her head without looking back at him. It's all right. It's time for the lecture. Let's go. She started walking. A lot of subjects followed behind that thin back. The immediate descendant of the prestigious Frighten family, also known as Master of Knights and the Holy Land. Julie, who was also called an example for all young knights of this world, was caught up in her lecture. Unlike Deculein, who used nothing but words, she held something that could be called a real lecture in which she demonstrated herself and swung her sword. One of the knights following her stopped. His red eyes flashed through his thick black hair. His gaze slowly turned back, glaring at the departing Deculein. A cold, desperate life stretched out towards his neck. Julie's knight, Baron, thought. Today, he sought answers to the endless suffering and anguish. To keep his lord from danger, this was his chance. It was only something he could do. Let's kill him. That nasty, dirty man. I shall cut his throat, then dice him into little pieces. Let's make my lord happy. The school cafeteria. Ifrin sighed as she rummaged through the pitiful omelette rice. RG. She tried to screw Deculein over back in the lecture hall. Deculein's magic circle interpretation method he was so proud of was obviously just hot air, and he couldn't make use of her father's ability, so it would put him in a pickle if he were asked to interpret a new technique in a situation he couldn't cheat in. Of course, there was a risk of her getting shot down by Deculein, but for him to reverse the situation like that. She didn't think he'd turn a person into an impolite idiot just because they didn't say their name. He's a tough opponent. I thought I'd die out of embarrassment. Pooh-hoo-hooped, the laughter still rang in her ear, but it worked out. PFT sounds like an illusion type. Ifrin was all smiles. As expected, he must have been embarrassed because he didn't have any real experience, right? What illusion magic? If he were desperate, why'd he choose illusion magic? Illusion magic is a very difficult type of magic, because in order to overcome and deceive the perception and consciousness of others, it takes a tremendous amount of mana to the point where the cost-performance rate is utterly miserable. That's why a medium is essential when using most illusion-type magic techniques. But, illusion-type magic without a medium? You're not only an idiot. You're a real idiot. That time she felt really satisfied. Ifrin. Ifrin. A loud voice calling Ifrin along with footsteps approached. She looked over. They caught her eye last week at the newcomer orientation for magicians. Thank you. Huh? What? For what? Ifrin only blinked. That same sorcerer put his hands on her shoulders and shouted. The magic circle by the entrance of the dorm. Last night, an unidentified magic circle drawn with red liquid appeared on the sorcerer's dormitory's front door. It was a magic circle that has never appeared before in the academic world, so people were raging, saying things like it's the devil's work, but now newbies were all motivated, saying things like I'll analyze it and build my foundation on that. There was fierce competition for it in each division. What? But I didn't do anything. Come on. You did nothing? You asked Professor Deculein. Huh? Ifrin felt embarrassed. I didn't ask him, I just screwed with him, you know? What are you talking about? Oh, that's so awesome. We were so scared we couldn't even ask. You've got some balls. Huh? No, wait a minute, that magic is really barrier magic? Ifrin was bewildered. So you're saying Deculein was actually right? Yes. Really? If we assume it's barrier magic and reconstruct from there, it fits perfectly. Wow, Professor Deculein sure is great, isn't he? There was no medium, so how did he figure out that it's illusion-type magic? Ifrin's mouth that slowly opened almost hit the table. From that wide-open mouth only the sound of sharp breathing could be heard. Thank you, Ifrin. We're going to write up a report and hand it in. I'll write your name under it as well. No, you don't have to do that, but, yeah. Hand it in. Okay. They hurriedly rushed away. Ifrin stared blankly at their back. What nice people they are. They could have just not said anything, but they said they'd share the credit. However, the situation itself wasn't good. Deculein's reputation had gone up for no reason. He just got lucky. Did he guess? After some time, Ifrin, who was in denial, took out a piece of paper from her backpack. It was a plan with lectures, written by the professors at the tower, which were about to begin. Understanding Elemental Magic. Grade, Debutante Restricted, Advanced, 5 credits. Lecturer, Deculein von Grahen-Yucklein. Deculein's lecture. Although she didn't have an elemental attribute, that wasn't a reason not to sit in on it. In the first place, elements were the basis of all magic. Since ancient times, it has been said, know thy enemy and yourself, then you'll never lose. Just you wait. Ifrin growled, while staring at the syllabus. Chap 4, Deculein. Rotio Hall. That was the name of the university building I just gave a lecture in. It's the third largest building on the university grounds, built 10 years ago with the donations of the Yuckleins. Now I was walking out of the Rotio Hall and onto the campus. Right now the students had vacation, so there were few of them around, so I thought about taking a walk around the campus. It's wide. The university was much larger than I expected. Also, the entire area was flat and the gardens, playgrounds, various buildings, facilities, and the environment, including the streets, indeed looked similar to the American campus our team took as reference. First, I headed towards Deculein's office. For your information, the top university in the game was the Imperial University, and the tower is one of the most important faculties. In Korea, the magic department would be the Department of Medicine at Seoul National University, and the tower would correspond to the Seoul National University Hospital. While I was walking around like that, I felt someone walking behind me. Was it an assassin? I was startled, but fortunately, it was just the magician who was with me in the car. Though I didn't exactly know who they were, as they had their robes pulled down. Was your name Zaro? What? Pardon? No. I'm Alan. I got confused. But Alan and Zoro aren't, yeah. I walked without saying a word. Then Alan suddenly said something. Professor. You look so picturesque, walking like that. I should have brought a camera dash. You don't have to say things like that anymore. Rest assured. Oh, okay. I bet Deculein ordered you to do that in the past. The tower, like any ordinary tower, was built high enough that it could be seen from anywhere on the campus, so I could see where it was while walking. I reached it quickly. Senior Professor, Deculein von Grahan confirmed. Authentication completed. The magic tech door of the tower recognized my body and my iris and then opened by itself. As soon as I entered the tower lobby, there were many people who bowed to me. I greeted them and said something to Alan. "Let's go to the office." "Understood." Alan leapt forward and pressed the button on the lobby elevator. The floor number was 77. The Mana Stone elevator arrived in 3 seconds. Senior Professor, Deculein von Grahan. My office occupied almost half of this floor. It was such a wide and luxurious office. The interior was sparkling clean, the shelves were full of books and the desk was filled with crystal beads, fountain pens, a diamond name plaque, an imperial professor's seal, golden wands, etc. I looked around this blinding place without any expression. What is this? As soon as I sat down in the office chair, I noticed a book on the desk. Its form and specifications were similar to a guest book. Oh, this is the sponsorship list for the new magicians this year. I opened the cover and scanned its contents. New magician, debutante, Jalen 19. Attribute, element, main type, support, sponsorship, 30,000/500000 scouting report. I got the gist of it as soon as I looked over it. The tower was seen as a research institute in this world. It was similar to Caltech or MIT back in my world, and research funds were indispensable. No, a magician needed even more money than some modern-day scientist or engineer. Astronomical amounts of resources are spent not only on developing practical, destructive or useful magic, but also on basic food expenses, material expenses, etc. for the development of the magician themselves. As I was looking at that person, I titled my head. Some magicians' names were shining gold. I almost instinctively realized that they were names of beneficial people. Perhaps this was the result of the combination of man of great wealth and vision. Man of great wealth. Rating. Rare. Description. A born man of great wealth. If it comes to money making, you hold unrivaled intuition. The more information is given, the more accurate it is. Vision. Rating. Rare. Description. Stroke, and the total amount was a little over 60 pages. Sure enough. Will my understanding also apply to magic? Can I understand the operation of something as complex as that? I closed my eyes, faced with this uncertain situation. After turning a switch in my mind, I opened my eyes again. My vision turned blue. The lights in the room flickered and blinked like stars. In the midst of this world spreading out in front of me like an impressionist painting, my focus was solely on the magic book. Both my eyes only looked at the described magic circle. At that moment, understanding activated. My mind was seething hot. This forced boost pushed through my whole body. So even beyond just boosting my hearing and seeing, my consciousness rose to higher levels. Psychokinesis. The magic circle rose from the book into the air. Curves and straight lines entangled with each other, forming something that looked like a talisman. My own magic power flowed along these subtle lines, appearing blue and brilliant. A ray of magical power that started from one point formed a line, filled the surface and manifested magic. This was the magical manifestation of my understanding. A visualization of an image. A magic circle called psychokinesis formed, illuminating the mansion, and soon seeped into my head. By injecting magical power into an object, condensing it like a nucleus, it enables the magician's will to control said object. In other words, the magician controls the magic nucleus inside of the object and not the object itself. Thus, the key to this magic is to compress the size of the nucleus as much as possible and make the magic circuit that holds the object harden. I understood the principle behind psychokinesis and was able to memorize it in my brain. As soon as I stopped using understanding, I let out the breath I was holding back. My temples hurt and my eyes were swollen. I took out a fountain pen from my inner pocket and infused mana into it. Magical power permeated the fountain pen's interior, and like that I made this long, thin pen float with just my will. It worked. At this moment, the basic psychokinesis, which I couldn't understand a minute ago, I realized without having to think about old-fashioned magic circles or how to control my mana. That was proof that the complete magic was memorized in my brain. Once a fully understood magic is memorized in the brain, the memorized magic can be used at any time without having to formulate a magic circle. No, the brain unconsciously formulates them. This is called memorizing. This was the moment I got to experience firsthand what I only read in the settings once before. That's good and all, but I was still just moving a fountain pen with my will. If basic psychokinesis was just something of this level, even if I master advanced psychokinesis, I'd never reach the level of the key sword I'm imagining. Isn't it just non-mainstream magic? Isn't there any way to enhance its performance? Of course, with my limited talent, it was hard to do anything about this. While I was struggling to think of something, stroking my chin, I suddenly remembered a certain trick. If I engrave a magic circle all over my body. There were several major premises of this world's magic. Among them, the most prominent one is the larger the magic circle, the more powerful it is. If that's the case, if I'm able to comprehend my whole body using the characteristic understanding, I should be able to engrave a magic circle not only on just my brain, heart, or lower abdomen, but on my whole body. It's worth a try. Of course, it'll obviously put a greater burden on my body. There'll certainly be some unexpected side effects as well. So, let's think this over one more time. This body, isn't it that of an Iron Man? That madness called memorizing magic using my whole body is only possible because of Iron Man in the first place. Phew. I was excited to try it out, but I calmed myself down with a deep breath. My remaining mana was 800. I was just going to taking a quick look anyway, so that should be enough. I activated understanding and let magic flow through my body. I felt an excruciating intense pain. It felt as if my bones and muscles all over my body were getting crushed by a hammer, as if all of my muscles were getting twisted and torn apart. It was incomparable. Creak. Crack. All these sounds were coming from my body. My joints were twisting and my heart was breaking down. At least that's how I felt. But even while getting baptized by this intense pain, this body didn't even let out a groan. It didn't even bite its lip. Even though it couldn't control the flow of its sweat, it never bent its waist even a bit. A highly consistent posture. A tenacious, unbending spirit. Grace. Acting with this false bravado bordering on madness and aristocratic ego, that's the most basic understanding of this character. I thoroughly controlled the mana within my body to run through my blood vessels. I attached my will to every part of my body through the flow of mana. My heart, muscles, bones and intestines. This was to engrave the psychokinesis magic circle into my skin. Snap dash. As I heard the sound of something breaking, a sense of weakness settled in me. It was a failure. I exhausted my mana, so understanding got deactivated. I quickly opened my eyes. My whole body was burning with rashes, redness, and itching. Of course, I didn't scratch at it. That would go against my dignity. I'll do the rest later. Mana, 1/3, 375. It failed due to my lack of mana. It just ended up getting engraved a little around my shoulder. Fortunately, I didn't have to start from the beginning again just because I failed. In other words, this process worked through gradual understanding. To compare it to a game, even if you failed stage 2 after winning stage 1, you'd just start over from the start of stage 2 again instead of G back to stage 1. 2 weeks. Neck, shoulders, arms, hands, belly, thighs, calves, feet. I roughly estimated how long it would take for 8 parts of my body. Approximately 2 weeks for basic psychokinesis. For something of a higher level, like advanced psychokinesis, even longer. 11. I got up from my chair, putting my thoughts together. I took a shower first, because my whole body was soaked in sweat. I wiped my body with a natural body wash and lay on the bed with a robe on. Pajamas. I felt like I was going to faint. My body wanted me to wear my pajamas. Sleeping in a robe was absolutely unacceptable. Fuck off. I didn't force Missile to wear it. Since I'm Kim Woo-jin, not Deculein, I won't be manipulated by some personality determined by code. Chapter 6, Professor. I spent 2 weeks immersed in trying to understand magic and my own body. As a result, I memorized the magic, basic psychokinesis, on my whole body. It was like an invisible tattoo of a huge psychokinesis magic circle engraved on my skin. Float. There were 3 fountain pens floating like paper airplanes in the spacious living room. My psychokinesis limit was 10 fountain pens. 300 kilograms of pure metal. Considering that the specifications of psychokinesis described in the magic book was: the limit of basic psychokinesis is 30 kilograms if it matches well with the magician's own attributes, or if it's just a simple push. This was a tremendous improvement. This isn't enough, considering it took 2 weeks, but it's satisfactory. Of course, only its performance has been amplified, but I was still far from mastering it. Rather, it was more difficult to master, because its performance was superior. Although I was training as efficiently as possible with the help of understanding, I still had trouble writing with a fountain pen. I'd only be satisfied if I were able to draw a picture of Choi Min-hwan. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Choi Min-hwan. I'm done with the basics. I picked up Beginner Control Magic, Volume 1 from the desk. Here, the difference between basic psychokinesis and beginner psychokinesis lay in the number of lines, which were 18 more strokes. Basic psychokinesis was a magic consisting of 20 line strokes and 2 circles, but beginner psychokinesis had 38 line strokes and 3 circles. Of course, I only have to memorize 18 more strokes and not 38, as the basic form is the base for the beginner form and the strokes are extending out from it. However, this time the thickness of the line was creating problems. I'll do it later. The body needed time to recover, and if I immediately went to the beginner level without mastering basic psychokinesis, I obviously wouldn't be able to control it. Therefore, my next objectives were as follows. Basic Metal Magic Volume 1. Basic Fire Magic Volume 1. Basic Earth Magic Volume 1. Magic books of these 3 properties. Among them, I could only learn magic compatible with the control type. This was an unexpected side effect. Since the control type magic, psychokinesis, had been engraved into my entire body, learning magic that would contrast the control type would put a burden on my body. For example, Summon Spirit was a type that conflicted with control, so it was impossible for me to learn it, but what I could learn was the malleability type, support type, destruction type, in that order, as it had similar forms to control magic. Well, it didn't really matter anyway. That guy was only talented in control type magic. I guess, this was also a type of choosing and focusing. Knock, knock. Just when I was about to open a book, someone knocked on the door. I retrieved the floating fountain pens and answered. What's the matter? This is Roy. Magician Alan said he came to bring over some lecture materials. It meant that Alan came over. That's right. The first class of the semester would start 10 days later, next Thursday. I shall come out in a minute. I changed my clothes with psychokinesis. Well, I tried to change them, but my pants always kept floating towards my upper body, so I put it on myself. Going down to the first floor, I saw Alan and my servants putting down large boxes on the floor. Is this for my lecture? Yes. This is the summary for the first semester. I did it like every year. The eyes of Alan, who answered like that, were surrounded by dark circles. Though the reason why I felt sorry for him weren't these dark circles, but rather that bright face he had after completing his work. Good work. The other professors of the tower had as many as 20 or at least 5 people under them, while I only had Alan. This was entirely Deculein's fault. Okay. Then, I shall go back now. I grabbed Alan's robe while he was about to return. Eek. It's late. Have dinner before you go. Pardon? No, I dash. Eat before you go. I beckoned to my servant. Following that, the servant quickly led Alan to the dining hall. I'm really fine. It's fine, sit down. Even just the appearance of this dining hall seemed to have intimidated Alan into not being able to move from where he stood. Sit down. Okay. Go ahead and eat. The meal was prepared quickly. This was a feast even to me. Alan was stunned for a moment, but then skillfully picked up the knife and fork. It's already very late, so stay here for the night. Pardon? No, I shall not have you refuse. Ah. Oh, okay. 1 in the morning. In the silent study where one could only hear the second hand of the clock ticking, I was preparing for a lecture. Lecture summary, Deculein Understanding Elemental Attribute Magic. Thanks to Alan's lecture summary, my preparations in itself were going smoothly. However, it took me a staggering amount of 3,500 mana to just understand half of the first lecture, and that was just the start. That meant that I had to spend about 1,000 mana per week for one lecture to proceed smoothly, though, fortunately, what I grasp using understanding isn't easily forgotten. It would be a lot better if I just took out the useless parts. I performed censorship for the first time in my life. Alan only wrote down the essentials and boldly excluded those deemed too basic or useless in his summary. In fact, these unnecessarily fine details were added partly due to Deculein's uselessly serious nature. After writing up the plan for about an hour, I checked the schedule. It's in 9 days now, huh? It was past midnight, so there were only 9 days left until the start of the semester. Until then, as Professor Deculein, I had to cultivate some magical knowledge. I was a bit nervous because I was a professor before ever being one, but thanks to the personality system, the burden was lightened. I also had the trait arrogant grace. This trait would make listeners more focused on what I was saying and make it easier for them to understand. Of course, there was also the way of just quitting my professorship. That would be the most comfortable. However, Deculein was always a professor in the game. In other words, being a professor might be the prerequisite for the side quests and main quests. I shouldn't prematurely quit my job when I didn't even have a clue of what's going to happen. This should be enough. I folded my handwritten syllabus and put it in an envelope. For reference, Deculein's lecture was at full capacity with 150/150 students. It was popular because the lecture was given by a few senior professors of the Imperial University's tower. A one-dimensional understanding of such topics tended to be inaccurate after all. A deeper understanding of such phenomena is needed. Magicians of the university tower are assigned to the lower-ranked debutante as soon as they enter the tower, and only by accumulating enough essential magic credit are they able to promote from debutante to soldat, enabling them to choose their career path. In that respect, the magic credits given by Deculein's lecture were just a meager 5 points. Since it was a combination of 3 lectures, it couldn't be unpopular even if the professor is a fricking jerk. Knock, knock. At 3 a.m. this week's Wizard's Journal was delivered. I shall leave it here. The butler knocked on the door and pushed a journal under the door. I brought it in using psychokinesis and read it. Wizard Journal, New Year's Special. It was the most prestigious journal in the world of magic, the Wizard Journal. Looking at the cover, it seemed like the voice of a certain person was ringing in my ear. As players build their reputation, they'll be listed in this journal. Little things like this are what makes this game fun. Wu Jin, if you start out as a magician, wouldn't you feel proud of your achievements if you read about them in something like this? It was a memory that made me feel nostalgic for some reason. Because of that, I could still remember that I was Kim Wu Jin. Let's see if that's really possible. I grinned and opened the journal. Rookie Magician of the Year. First, the Rookie of the Year section stood out to me. This setting was explicitly put in by the company as they were aiming for Game of the Year. Rookie Magician of the Year. Award, Sylvia von Usipin Iliad Attribute, Origin Main Type, Specialized. Sylvia, who took over the Iliad family at the age of 17, has 3 colors of origin in her heart: red, blue and green. These 3 primary colors are also called realization of miracles. By mixing these origin colors together, anything can be achieved. Therefore, Sylvia can create everything as long as her mana is enough. Her reputation of being of natural noble character is by no means a lie. I was aware of that name. A blonde beauty with the trait woman of great beauty and successor of the Iliad family, which is equal to the Deculein family. The status of the Deculeins is still subtly higher, but that difference will gradually widen due to this character named Sylvia. I turned the pages and looked for something on Deculein. Deculein, Deculein, Deculein. As I was looking around for my name like this, I found a fairly large section. Senior Professor of the Imperial University, Deculein von Deculein. He stood out in the field of elemental magic from an early age, and, after graduating from the academy, became the youngest senior professor in the history of the Imperial University. However, presently, now that he has reached his mid-30s, he has yet to show any further achievements. He's still immersed in the magic study he declared 3 years ago. Now should be his time to show his worth and new achievements. If I were the original Deculein, I would have immediately contacted the journal's editorial office. What kind of bullshit are these journalists writing? They're right. However, the Wizard's Journal wasn't something money or family prestige could affect. Furthermore, even if some of Deculein's personality traits got transmitted to me, I was still Kim Woo-jin. I was ignorant and rather carefree about magic. I didn't really feel pressured to perform well. I also had no pride in what I do. People tend to become irritated if they covet more than their own means. I just want to survive long enough to get an understanding of this game. It's already 4 o'clock. When I looked at the clock, I noticed that it was 4 in the morning, so I headed for bed. Like that, I was laying in bed before I opened my eyes again. It was 6 a.m. The performance of Iron Man was really astonishing, but that wasn't always a good thing. I want to sleep for at least 6 hours. It was always so early when I woke up. Only the shy first rays of the sun were touching the ground, the glow slowly flowing into the room. This languid scenery was peaceful and sleep-inducing, but I couldn't fall asleep even if I wanted to. My mind was fully awake after all. Sleepiness and tiredness simply melted away after just a few hours of sleep. For me, who was trapped in this game, 22 hours to spend in a day was way too much time. The lecture would start this Thursday, but I already went to the tower on Monday. I intended to use the tower's magic training room for employees. Senior Professor Deculein, permission granted. The training was quite simple. You only had to solve a given stage, like a mini-game, using magic, that's all. Players gain bonus traits when they clear the last stage. Maybe that system will also apply to me as well. Also, the magic used here is treated similarly to the real world, so you might be able to grasp one's magic's aura. It's me. Deculein. Confirmed. Please select the type of magic you want to train in. I chose the control type psychokinesis magic. Several dots appeared mid-air. The dots intertwined and moved intricately. Level 1, manipulate objects with psychokinesis to pierce the dots. That was easy enough. I lifted the dagger from my inner pocket using my psychokinetic powers. The dagger beautifully swam through the air, piercing the dots. I finished level 1 in about 2 minutes. Level 2 doubled the amount of dots, so it took me 5 minutes. Level 3 didn't conjure dots, but illusory butterflies, 15 minutes. Level 4 conjured a swarm of illusory bees that swarmed around everywhere, 40 minutes. For the next hour I struggled against a swarm of ants at level 5 before I quit. It's hard. Although, it does feel satisfying. I used up 2,500 mana. Now that I had done this, I should have grasped the aura to some level. Checking magic aura, Deculein von Deculein. Every magician's magic had an aura, or simply put, a personality. For example, violent, provocative, explosive, calm, undulating, manipulative, cunning, subdued, composed, tranquil, etc. This aura usually resembles the magician's character, which seems to be a minor setting, but it was surprisingly important. Why was it similar to aptitude? Violent, provocative and explosive auras tend to strengthen destructive magic, while manipulative and cunning auras amplify the performance of enchantment or support magic. In that sense, my magic aura would be. Let's see. Graceful aura. Oh. Grace, high in meaning, dignity, and elegance. Simply put, this means that the use of magic itself is imbued with grace and dignity. It fits really well. I laughed out in exasperation. In many ways, this was an aura that suited Deculein very well. Chapter 7, Professor. Thursday, March 20th, year 958 of the Imperial Calendar. Level 9 clear. Congratulations. No higher levels available. Thank you. I focused on training until the day of the lecture. I just cleared the stage while only using basic psychokinesis, and as a reward, I got a bonus trait. Psychokinesis Master. Rating. Common. Description. The result of intense training. Increases performance of psychokinesis by 11% and reduces mana consumption by 11%. The explanation was simple, but I was most grateful for this. I especially liked the 11%. As I grow, the value of this trait will also increase. I sat on my office chair and looked at the clock. It was 10 a.m. The lecture started at 3 p.m. I had plenty of time and I didn't have to get to the class early today either. I had to wait until 3:30 and just show up when Alan gives me the signal, that's all. What we ambitiously prepared was the so-called the first lesson is self-study tactic. The third floor of the university's magic tower. Ifrin sighed in front of the classic classroom. Hugh. Deculein was in there. Moreover, she had to be in the same space as Deculein and listen to his lecture. That was painful in itself, but... Would Deculein remember what happened in that lecture a month ago? No, didn't he forget my last name in the first place? Luna. The last name of the magician he killed. If the target of her revenge didn't even remember that name, then she'd probably be even angrier, she'd probably go mad. So what was she supposed to do? Did she have to go to the trouble of reminding him of his evil deeds? That kind of tension was strangling her. Ifrin, what are you doing standing here? Hearing someone's words, Ifrin woke up from her thoughts. A female classmate wearing a robe was looking at her with a smirk. Oh, I'm a little nervous. Go on ahead. Indeed. Me as well. I searched for information on Deculein on the Wizza board and it said that he was very strict. Still, he's pretty handsome. Ifrin, who was standing next to her classmate walking and muttering, saw another woman approaching from the hallway. And for a moment, she was speechless. Oh. With every step she took, her well-maintained blonde hair fluttered about seeming like a golden stream. The scent of roses seemed to waft from her elegant gestures, which flowed softly, sophisticated and naturally without revealing her thrones. She was part of the class of people whose bloodline itself was recognized as dignity itself even in the pyramid of hierarchy among the nobles she was on a particularly high layer. A woman from the Iliad family, considered one of the most noble bloodlines in the empire. Sylvia. Sylvia von Josipin Iliad. She already knew that that lofty young miss was a role model for many, but Ifrin took an openly combative stance. She glared at her and licked her lips with her tongue. Ifrin looked down on Sylvia. It wasn't just simply feelings of inferiority. Theirs was a long-lasting and tough relationship. The Luna family has been the Lord of Juhali, part of the territory of the Iliads since ancient times. It was like saying they were relatives a long time ago. However, 10 years ago. Before she was even 8 years old. Giltheon, the head of the Iliads, looked at her. She could vividly remember that look in his eyes. She remembered their act of besieging their mansion with the territorial troops to deal with them like difficult-to-dispose-of garbage. She remembered that voice that sounded like they were speaking to some lowly thing. All because they feared her and her father's talents. However, this wasn't their territory, this was the magic tower and she wasn't young anymore. When it comes to talent, she wasn't in any way inferior to those bastards pretending to be the world's greatest nobles. Above all, the magicians of the tower didn't have castles or families. They were only recognized by their given name and their talents. Therefore, Sylvia only glanced at Ifrin and went straight inside. There wasn't even a hint of an expression on her face. There were no emotions in her eyes, completely blank. It was as if she didn't even know a person called Ifrin at all. Scratch. Ifrin, who was the only one standing there with a heavy expression, awkwardly scratched the back of her neck, before going in. Huh? And then she was perplexed. It wasn't a classroom, but a spacious gym. The ceiling was incredibly high, and there were wells, trees, dirt, sand, gravel, and piles of iron on the ground. Wow. Professor Deculein's class was supposed to be like this? That's interesting. I know, right? There was nothing about this on the whiz boards. Maybe it's because it's our first class. Unlike Ifrin, who was only perplexed, the other magicians were half surprised and half curious. Oh, guys. Look at this. One of them pointed somewhere. There was a sign stuck in the middle of the space. The professor wants to measure your skills as the first class. This place is full of elements. You can do anything you want by yourself. Huh. After approaching it and checking its content, Ifrin frowned. What is this? What were they supposed to do here? Whatever that is, how were they supposed to do it on their own? However, the other magicians seemed to be familiar with this strange situation. There must have been a lot of classes like this at the academy, huh? I didn't know about that because I taught myself. Oh, maybe? Suddenly, the person next to her muttered as if they had realized something. She glanced over and it was someone named Geharin, the son of a famous magician. Ifrin sneaked up to him. What is it, Dash? What do you think it is? Huh? Ooh. I think it's something like this. Geharin touched the pavement. Then, water and soil congealed around his hand, rose into a long and slender shape. It was a mud tower. It told us to try anything. And this class is called Understanding Elemental Attribute Magic. So, wouldn't that mean to make something out of the elements available? It's about handling pure elements. Oh, that could be it. Chapter 8, Professor. The basement of the tower. The disciplinary committee's meeting place felt so cold as if it were gnawing at one's flesh. In this place where the discipline of the University Magic Tower was exercised, a total of 7 members in charge of said disciplinary actions of the magicians gathered, and the subject of disciplinary actions would sit on the other side of the invisible glass waiting for their punishment. Why did these two fight? I don't know yet. The first seat, that is, the highest seat, belonged to the board chairman, and I could see 2 people through the glass from the second seat next to it. Why don't you know? I don't know because I didn't ask. Oh, right. Ifrin, who was brought to the disciplinary committee, just bowed her head and wiggled her fingers. Sylvia, on the other hand, seemed rather confident and calm. This situation was entirely caused by the fight between these two. However, Sylvia was the heir to the Iliad family, and Ifrin was just a fallen noble with nothing to her name, so it wasn't hard to see what the disciplinary committee would do. Ah, Chairman, Senior Professor Deculein. You're already here. The door opened and the other disciplinary committee members arrived one after the other. The fat male professor with a sly smile on his lips was Laline from the support department. Can't believe this happened in the first class. I'm very sorry, Professor Deculein. The skinny man with his head down is Professor Latran of the spirit department, and the silent one in the robe was probably Professor Fesley in charge of the dormitory, and the rest. A total of 7 were gathered here. Really now? Some strange girl dared to touch the rookie magician of the year. As soon as Laline sat down on the chair, he stared at Ifrin. Latran had a similar look in his eyes. Quite right. Apparently, she didn't even go through the academy. Fortunately, these words didn't reach Ifrin. Although we could see Ifrin, she couldn't see us. Quite right. Apparently, she didn't even go through the academy. Fortunately, these words didn't reach Ifrin. Although we could see Ifrin, she couldn't see us. Still, I heard that Senior Professor Deculein did a good job handling this situation. Lillian looked at me with furtive eyes. I didn't have the energy to respond to that flattering remark. It's not that I don't want to answer, I was just exhausted. Even now, I was barely holding on with my willpower. I used up all my mana, even squeezing more out than that, to stop that situation. The professor in charge would be in trouble if someone got hurt because of his negligence. That's right, it seems like I underestimated our Professor Deculein a bit. Still, Professor Deculein is a magician of the monarch rank. A debutante wouldn't be able to beat someone like him even if there were 100 of him. You are absolutely right. The board chairman and Lillian chatted as such. I stared at Ifrin without saying a word. Naturally, my brows were furrowed. Even so, Professor Deculein. Don't be too angry. I shall figure something out. Lillian seemed to have misunderstood my expression as anger, but that's not what it meant. A strange air was rising from the cowering Ifrin. A thin, ominous gas that spreaded like water vapor. I frowned to get a closer look at this strange phenomenon. If my guess is right, then that was the visual manifestation of another trait, fate of a villain, that was only visible to me due to the trait, vision. Fate of a villain. Rating? Description, the fate of a villain. The whole world wants him dead, however, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. The whole world wants me dead. The predestination of her murder, that is, the death flag that Ifrin would one day kill me, was now clearly revealed to me by vision. So now that we're all here, let's start the disciplinary committee meeting regarding debutante magician Ifrin and Sylvia. No, how dare you fight inside the classroom? With magic, no less? If it weren't for Senior Professor Deculein, people would have gotten hurt, you ignorant fools. The disciplinary committee was fierce from the start. One could only see silhouettes through the glass, but Ifrin knew that shape and voice. Professor Lillian. In yesterday's class he seemed like a very kind professor, but right now, as he was angry, he seemed very scary. So, what was the reason for your fight? Lillian asked. Ifrin glanced at Sylvia next to her. That bitch swore my father out. No, didn't I swear at her more? It wasn't such a rude insult. But whatever it was, she couldn't say anything because Deculein was right next to Lillian. In fact, even if he weren't there, I wouldn't say anything. The thing about her father. She didn't want to talk with anyone about that. Even more so as an excuse to avoid disciplinary actions. I can't tell you. What? Are you joking with me right now? Professor Lillian's face was distorted. No. It's just equals. Then tell me, why did you fight? Was it because you felt inferior? Ifrin kept her mouth shut and bowed her head. Lillian, who was wheezing, now looked at Sylvia next to her. Sylvia, then you give us an answer. During class, I accidentally destroyed this girl's results. That led to an argument. What? You created this situation for that reason? Isn't it fully that ignorant fool's fault then? Hey, do you have anger control issues? I don't even remember your name. Ifrin clenched her fists. She had the taste of blood spreading in her mouth. It might have come from her lips, which she bit too hard. Is that so? Well, I think it has almost been decided. Professor Deculein? Don't you have anything to say about this? It was your class. The chairman called the name of the person she hated the most, Deculein. She could feel Deculein's gaze penetrating through the glass. Ifrin's heart pounded heavily. Whether he knew her or not, she had no other choice but to resign herself now. Deculein, as a senior professor and the tower's disciplinary committee member, shall ask Sylvia a question. However, it was strange. For some reason, the subject of the interrogation seemed to be Sylvia, not her. What was your fault in this situation? Ifrin, who was sinking to the bottom, quickly raised her head and blinked. Flustered, Sylvia licked her lips. I shall ask again. In that situation, did you really do nothing wrong? It was an unexpected development. A number of questions filled Ifrin's head. I was sure Deculein was going to attack me though. Why is he questioning Sylvia all of a sudden? Oh, no way? He's doing it as a Deculein, not as Deculein, to keep the Iliad family's heir in check. But why? Anyone can see that this is my fault, right? Sylvia. I'm sure you were capable of preventing this situation. Deculein's unique, cool, straight voice sounded. However, you did not. Did you wait for someone to get hurt because of the magic explosion? A small crack appeared on Sylvia's blank expression. That mask she wore from the start of the meeting, which seemed like a thick sheet of ice, was slowly breaking. Or was that the extent of your abilities everyone was looking forward to? Cracks, once formed, quickly led to destruction. She lowered her head to hide her slightly biting her lips. I'm sorry. I could have prevented it, but didn't. It was my malice-wishing magician Ifrin's fault to grow bigger. Then, she just obediently accepted her mistake. Huh? A stupid sound dropped out of Ifrin's mouth. The situation I was barely able to understand has become chaotic again. What's with her? I could have prevented it, but didn't. However, Senior Professor Deculein. It wouldn't be her fault for defending against that attack, now would it? Whoever attacked first is at fault. Professor Leline urgently stepped in. Then Deculein tilted his head and glanced at him. If you want to use a narrative like that, then wouldn't this situation be my fault as I organized the lecture, in the first place? Professor Leline, do you want to blame me? What? No. I don't think so. Be clear. The firm, eloquent voice reverberated throughout the interrogation room. Ifrin and Sylvia swallowed their saliva without realizing. Tack, tack. Leline, frightened, clacked his teeth a few times, then fumbled before he shook his head. No way. It was just that unsavory. I set up the environment for the purpose of the lecture. I have not given any direction as to what to do in it as well. So even if there was a quarrel, one could see it as part of the class content. It was just sophistry. However, the faculty, crushed by Deculein's prestige, did not dare to refute. The chairman, the only one who would have been able to fight back, was just sitting back and seemed like she was enjoying the show. Therefore, the word unsavory might as well be an insult to my class, but I have to admit that it has led to a dangerous situation. At that point, no matter how hard she thought, no matter how much she wanted to deny it, no matter how hard she tried to understand it, Ifrin couldn't help but admit it. Deculein was. No, that Deculein was defending her. However, if we take out the risk from magic, what would remain of it? Besides, they are just debutantes of the tower. Whether Deculein knows my father or not, I was sure that I'd get expelled. The Deculein I know would certainly have pushed for that. Ifrin looked at him, feeling that she couldn't understand him. Rather than trying to cover up meaningless errors and wrongdoings, and killing their spirit by threatening them, I believe 'tis the duty of a great magician to teach the depth of experience so that they can experience these kinds of situations inside the tower, so that they can maintain their dignity outside. What do you think, Professor Leline? Ego. Of course, you're absolutely right. As expected of Senior Professor Deculein. With but only a few simple words I have been completely persuaded. You are right. The professors agreed. If Deculein was that proactive, everyone couldn't help but agree with him. Even if Deculein wasn't a professor, he'd still be the esteemed Count Deculein, but they were nothing but professors. Clap, clap, clap. The sound of applause that didn't fit the situation at all filled the interrogation room. Anyone who'd seen this would think they held a concert here. That sounds good. I, too, still remember the old days. I almost got suspended by a professor back then as well. The board chairman also smiled and nodded. So, what are you guys doing? Aren't you going to go back? Yes? The bewildered Ifrin asked, without knowing who the other party was. What do you mean, yes? You heard everything, right? There will be no disciplinary actions taken. Kids like you grow by fighting after all. But there won't be a next time. Hearing that, Sylvia jumped out of her seat. She left without looking back. However, Ifrin didn't do that. She just blankly stared through the window. Now, let us go as well. I thought it would be a waste of time, but I was glad to know that Professor Deculein cared so much for the new magicians. Before the frozen Ifrin, the professors of the disciplinary committee stood up. They left one by one. Ifrin, who had just been sitting there, watching, soon came to her senses and shouted loudly. That. The other professors just glanced at her, but there was only one silhouette. Only the person presumed to be Deculein looked at her. Then Ifrin told him. There's something I want to tell you. Huh. A faint laugh that seemed almost inaudible. It was extremely attractive, although it shouldn't be perceived as attractive. At that time, it was you in that lecture hall. Ifrin shuddered at these words. She immediately got cold feet. It felt like her lips were going to dry up. However, she followed through without much hesitation. There's something I want to ask. The thing Ifrin wanted to ask. Do you remember the last name Luna? Do you know my father? Do you know the man who took his own life 3 years ago? That. But. If she were to ask that, he'd probably ignore her as well. As Ifrin was hesitating again like this, Deculein just cut the conversation off. You don't need to ask. At that moment, Ifrin came back to her senses. It was as if icicles fell down on top of her head. You're talented, so don't waste your talents as you please. He left these words behind. She couldn't catch him this time. She was left in just an empty interrogation room. In this space, left alone, Ifrin, who was brooding over Deculein's words, was convinced. He knows. Me. My father. Therefore, this was just simple pity. Just a tiny bit of compassion. He felt some guilt over my father's death. So he helped me. Ah. Ifrin felt her heart twist in anger over that matter, and while she was sad and confused about the situation, she wasn't even able to refuse said pity. In the end, she was relieved though. You know. That's enough. If you know. If you haven't forgotten. That's enough for now. Hup. After wiping away the tears from the corners of her eyes, and vigorously wiping the tip of her red nose, Ifrin left the interrogation room. Meanwhile, turning around, Deculein swallowed a sigh of relief. Destiny of a villain, overcoming death flags. Store currency +2. I successfully broke a death flag and obtained store currency. As expected, it was the right choice to side with Ifrin. Of course, there was an unintentional twist to this. Sylvia might hold a grudge against her over this incident after all. I was going to come out with that textbook saying, you're wrong and she's also wrong, but in broad terms it's nobody's fault, but I didn't think Sylvia would so readily admit to her faults. But what should I've done? I had to put out that fire to my feet then and there. Thanks to that, both of them ended up without any punishment, so it can be said to be a good outcome to some extent. There could have been a better way. Nevertheless, it was still regrettable. It was also because of Deculein's uselessly stubborn personality and his understanding didn't apply to human relationships at all. However, Deculein soon shook off Kim Woojin's mindset and left the interrogation room. Sylvia was sitting on a bench on the school campus, thinking. Quietly closing her eyes, she rewinded the event 3 hours earlier in her mind. At that time she clearly extinguished Ifrin's magic power that had attacked her. But in its place, she planted her own trap magic. She cleverly manipulated her magic to create a vortex as if Ifrin's and her own magic had collided. In fact, it was designed to respond to only Ifrin's magic power. Of course, it wasn't at a level that it would cause casualties, and if it did, she was going to help with the Iliad's financial resources. Therefore, there only should have been one victim. That would have been just Ifrin Luna. He knew. Deculein obviously knew. He was already aware of her trick. So instead of saying that it was Sylvia's handiwork, he twisted it and said, Sylvia didn't stop even though she could. In that instant, Deculein had asked her to comply. It was an unmistakable threat. How? Sylvia's only question was how. She could say with confidence that there were no magical observatory recordings of the classroom. They've already been carefully manipulated after she viewed the whole thing. In that case, the absurdity that Deculein had inferred the whole story with just his own insight and intelligence. Beep, beep dash. The horn broke her line of thoughts. Sylvia looked towards the sound's origin. A car was parked on the side of the road. The window went down and a familiar face appeared. Darling. That's where you were. He had blonde hair and golden eyes that resembled Sylvia's. The head of a noble magician who had inherited the bloodline of the Iliad family more clearly than anyone else, a high-ranking magician of the Esprit rank, and the proud father of Sylvia. Glithian von Ludwig Iliad. I heard the whole story. Get in. Yes. Sylvia plopped inside her father's car.